Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillahi wa kafa wa salamun ala ibadihi alladhina istafa amma ba'd. Let's start with Nur-ul-Idaah, the book of Salah. Today we talk about the prayer in Kaaba. Can we pray inside the Kaaba? So yes, we can pray inside the Kaaba, even obligatory prayer or nawafil, supererogatory prayer. Every prayer is perfectly fine inside the Kaaba and even on the top of Kaaba. Even if you do not have any barrier in front of you. However, it would be makruh, disliked to pray above the Kaaba because although the prayer would be valid, yet it would be disliked for the fact that you are rising above many different things around it, including Kaaba itself, the Hajar Aswad, the Maqam Ibrahim, all the blessed places and things which are placed in and around Kaaba. We should be honoring them and not to stand up and just climb the top of the Kaaba for prayers, because there's no special merit to that anyway. Now, if there are many people inside Kaaba, they can pray individually and they can pray in Jama'ah. If they pray in Jama'ah in and around Kaaba, it is perfectly fine because you can face whichever direction you want to take, even inside the Kaaba. Now, if the people are standing where they are having direction to the Qibla in different direction to Imam. So Imam is facing, for example, the north wall, and some Muqtadis are following the south wall or the other one. This is completely fine. All of these are okay, provided the only exception or the condition is that the Muqtadi should not be in front of Imam. Means his back should not be facing the face or the front or the chest of Imam. So Imam's face should not face the back of the Muqtadi. That is the only situation where the prayer would be nullified, because this would mean that the Muqtadi, the follower, is actually ahead of Imam. So that is null and void. So you can follow Imam by having your back towards the back of Imam, towards the side of Imam, your face towards the back of Imam, to the shoulder of Imam, from the side, from this way, because Qibla is all around you. So it is okay in each direction, except for one direction, which is that you are standing in such a way that the Muqtadi's back is facing the chest of Imam or the face of Imam. That would mean the Imam is behind the Muqtadi. Obviously, you cannot have Imam behind you. So the prayer would be invalid. And to face Imam, in front of each other, facing each other, this is disliked. This is makruh, although the prayer would still be valid, but disliked. So those are the two positions. Other than that, any position is fine. And likewise, around Kaaba, in the Masjid, it is perfectly fine to pray in any direction. Obviously, you can stand in front of Kaaba, facing Kaaba. So in a circle, for example, if you are making a big circle around Kaaba, the Imam and the people on the side of Imam, they must follow each other in such a way that Imam is ahead of them. So if on the wall, on the side where Imam is standing, the Muqtadi is closer to Kaaba than the Imam, means Imam is behind and Muqtadi is in front. For example, there are 3 safs. The Imam is standing in saf number 3. And the Muqtadi on the same side, on the same wall of the Kaaba, is standing in saf number 2 or 1, then his prayer would be invalid. But if you make this a circle and coming in front of Imam from another side of the Kaaba. So for example, Imam is standing where the gate of Kaaba is, where the door of Kaaba is, in the saf number 3. Yet the Muqtadi is standing in saf number 1 or 2, but on the opposite side, or on the right side, or on the left side, not on the same side of Imam, then he is fine. He can be ahead of Imam, because then he is still considered behind the Imam hukman. But on the same side, it will be completely not allowed. Now, if the Imam is leading the Muqtadis from inside of Kaaba, so Imam is inside the Kaaba and Muqtadis are outside of the Kaaba, as long as they can hear Imam and they would know by hearing the takbirat intiqaliyah, the motion and the movement of Imam, then it's fine. But this is disliked that the Imam is alone inside the Kaaba, everyone else is outside, because there'll be a huge gap with regards to the height of Imam. So it's better that Imam has one or two people with him and rest of the Muqtadis are outside of Kaaba, then there's no problem with that. That is perfectly fine. But even if the Imam is all by himself inside the Kaaba and everyone else is outside, the prayer is valid, provided people can hear and understand the action. If the door is closed, if the door is open, they can look at Imam and they know what to do. That is fine as well. And again, all the directions are fine, but just keep that in mind. This is important bit. As I mentioned before, so if the Imam is standing here, look at this picture, this is Kaaba. On this side, if the Muqtadi is ahead of Imam, his prayer would be invalid. If the Muqtadi is on the other side or on this side, right side or the left side and ahead of Imam, that is fine. Means ahead of Imam with regards to the saf number. He is in a saf in front of Imam, and that it would be fine. Okay, so that's easy. Prayer inside the Kaaba is perfectly fine, provided those few conditions, a few rules are fulfilled or followed. Now, the next topic is about qasr. Qasr is shortening. Shortening of prayer is mashru in Sharia. The traveler, who is the traveler? The traveler is someone who is shar'an a traveler, not someone who is traveling from here to there. No, there is a specific definition for that. The smallest journey due to which the legal rules of traveling is applied is the distance of 3 days. 3 days from the shortest days of the year. So just during the day, you do not have to walk very fast. You do not have to be very slow. A medium pace, walking from one place for 3 days, not whole day long, just during the daylight hours from morning to Dhuhr time, and then having rest, and the next day the same thing. So wherever you reach up to, that is the time, or that is the distance which is taken into consideration for someone to be shar'an a traveler. It could be walking, or it could be on the back of a camel. So the scholars have worked it out, and it turns out to be about 81 kilometers, roughly. 81 kilometers. Some say 78 kilometers. 81 is fine, which is roughly about 48 miles. Some say 54 miles, but more preferred is 48 miles, which is roughly equivalent to 78 to 81 kilometers, depending on which one do you take. So this is from your hometown where you live. So if you leave your hometown with the intention of staying and going about 48 miles away and staying there for less than 15 days. So all the conditions must be met. Number one, you have the intention to stay at that place, which is 48 miles away from your hometown for less than 15 days, which is 14 or less days. If it's 15 days, you are not a musafir, you are not a traveler. If it is less than 48 miles, you are not a traveler. It has to be 48 miles plus. And you get a lot of dispensation allowances, because in olden days it was very tough to be a traveler. And some of the dispensations are that you can wipe over the leather socks for 72 hours, whereas the resident is only allowed to do it for 24 hours. You've got 3 days to do so. If you're fasting, during travel, you are allowed to break your fast, even if you do not have any excuse. You may opt for not even fasting during travel. That's perfectly fine. There's no sin for that. Obviously, you would like to continue, or you would like to fast in the modern days because the travel is not as difficult as it used to be. And also that we are so weak that if we end up fasting all those days on our own later on after the Ramadan has gone, it becomes a big job. So we would rather go with the flow and follow everyone else and fast during the month of Ramadan. Obviously, the blessing is great there as well. However, if we did not fast, or if we break our fast, we are not sinful for that. Likewise, Friday and Eid prayer is not an obligation anymore for traveler. Likewise, sacrifice of the animal, if it happens to be Eid al-Adha, is not an obligation for the traveler. So you can skip all those, but obviously you would not be rewarded. Now, shortening the prayer. So the traveler is permitted to shorten the 4 rakat obligatory prayer, which is Dhuhr, Asr, and Isha, to make it 2 rakat only. You would not be sinful for that. In fact, this is an obligation in Hanafi school. Now, if the intention for travel was good or bad, it doesn't matter. Some other imams, like Imam Shafi, Imam Malik, rahimahumullah ta'ala, they opine that unless the intention is good or permissible intention, you would not be given this dispensation. So if someone is going on an evil journey to buy some alcohol, for example, from the other city, their traveler, would they be shortening their prayers? Imam Malik and Imam Shafi'i say no. Imam Abu Hanifa says that's a different matter. Obviously, they're committing a sin, but they are still a traveler shar'an, so they would be given this dispensation for shortening their prayers. But that's a difference of opinion. Now, when do you start shortening your prayer? So you plan to go tomorrow, for example. What time of the day, or what time, how much distance you have covered before you can start shortening your prayer? Not after 48 miles. It is, although the intention was for 48 miles, yet the time that you start your shortening is once you have left the vicinity of your city, where the dwellings end, where the people do not live anymore, which is the outskirts of any of those cities that you live in. So whichever city you live in, just outside of that boundary, which is normally known by the free land, empty land there. There are race courses, there are graveyards of the city. They tend to be an open place. There's deserted area, some farms. So that sort of area where the common people do not live. They're special areas outside of the main dwellings of the city. So as soon as you reach that part, you can start shortening your prayer, provided that is the time for the prayer. Okay. Obviously, if it's connected, if there was big gap and then you've got more dwelling after that, then the space between the two is counted as well. Now, you do not need to, as I said, if you've planned to go for 81 or 48 miles, but you already are within that time, within that distance, yet you would shorten it once you have reached the outskirts of your city dwellings, once you've gone out of the main area of the city or the village. And today, or in the modern time, you'll find some parks or cemeteries. Then you can start cutting short your prayer from that time on. It's called fina, or the boundary of the city or the place, like stable and the graveyards. So what are the conditions? The 3 conditions that must be fulfilled. That the person who is planning to be a traveler must be independent, means his intention of deciding how long to stay and where to stay, how far to go, is not dependent on someone else. For example, a soldier, he's on a journey. He can't decide how long he's going to be there. He will be told by his supervisor. So he can't make a decision on his own. So his intention is not counted. Likewise, Wife's intention would not be counted provided she's going with the husband. So husband would decide, or father would decide for the children, minors. So it must be that they can make their independent decision about how long to stay where they're planning to stay. Likewise, they should be pubertal, mature, not a minor. And likewise, they have to have the plan for going that far, 81 kilometers one way. If it's less than that, they cannot be a traveler. So what is azima? This concept of rukhsa. Normally people consider it to be a rukhsa. In Hanafi school, shortening your prayer is actually azima. Azima means that you are more dedicated and devout. You're not going after the dispensations, certain excuses, certain leeways given to you. You don't follow those. Rather, you go for the firmer, stricter, or more appropriate ruling of the two. Although there's allowance for the other one, but you go for the one which is more in keeping with a true believer. Obviously, if he opts for the rukhsa, which is the dispensation, he is not sinful. Now, in Hanafi school, shortening your prayer is a must. It is not a rukhsa. It is not a dispensation. It's actually azima. This is what you are supposed to do. You're not supposed. If you did it, if you performed 4 rakat, you have actually sinned. You are committing a sin. Whereas Imam Shafi'i and Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, rahimahumullah, they hold that shortening is a dispensation. So if you wish, you can continue. You can perform all 4. And for Imam Malik, it is sunnah. But as I said, Imam Abu Hanifa would consider, or the Hanafi school would consider it to be azima, an obligation, a must. You have no choice. You have to do only 2 fard. Now, if you happen to complete, if you didn't realize and you just performed 4 rakat, and obviously you would have set in the second rakat of 4 unit, then though it is disliked, it would not nullify your prayer. Your prayer would be fine because you did it unintentionally, or even if you did intentionally, it's disliked, it's sinful, yet you would be given the allowance for completion of that prayer. So that prayer would be accepted. Technically, you have done it. It's not void. It is not null. It is valid prayer. The first 2 rakat would be considered your fard, and the last 2 would be considered your nafil. So you would have 2 separate prayers. If you set in the second rakat, because sitting in the second rakat for 2 rakat is pillar, is fard, is a rukun, without which the prayer would be invalid. If you forgot to sit in the second rakat and stood up, did the 3rd and 4th, and then you said salam and did you sajda sahab, then your prayer is not valid. You have to, this would all be considered nafil, and you will have to do your 2 fard again for that zuhr or asr or isha. Okay, so always do your 2, not 4, when you're traveling. Now, if you did not sit, as I said, in the first sitting, then the two rakat will become all your null and void. Inshallah, you may get reward of some nafil. Now, if after the second rakat, you decided that I'm going to stay here for more than 15 days now, during that time, while you're praying, then the rest of your prayer will be fine. Then you can have 4, obviously, because now you are a musafir. You're now muqim. Muqim is the resident. So you become resident now. So your prayer would be fine. You're not a traveler anymore. But obviously, people don't do that. You can continue to shorten your prayer until you re-enter your hometown. Or if you move from one place to another place, which is whatever duration that is. So duration has to be less than 15 days for one particular city. So if you have the intention, for example, you plan to go to Pakistan for holidays, the plan was to be there for 10 days. And it so happened that after 6 or 7 days, or few days before you were about to travel back, there was some accident happen, God forbid. Someone got unwell from your family, or you got some extra work that you did not envisage. So you had to extend your days by another week. So altogether, it would be 15, 16 days. Yet, at one point, you have not decided to stay for more than 14 days. So you would still be traveler. So you decided that I would stay there for another week to complete my task, my project, or my mom or dad who's unwell, hopefully they'll be fine. But it so happened that after 6 or 7 days, 5 days, before you could travel, another thing happened. And he happened to extend it further by another, say, 10 days, 11 days, 12 days, but not 15 days. So if you continued like this for whole year, whole life, you would still be considered traveler. You can continue to shorten your prayer. Obviously, you don't do it with that bad intention. You know what your intention is. It is all by yourself in your mind. You decide. So if you knew it, you'll be there for more than 2 weeks, and but you say, oh, I'm going to be there for 10 days just to shorten your prayer, then Allah knows what you're intending or how you're planning. But if you truly have this idea of traveling after 7 days, 10 days, 11 days, but you happen to extend it every time, but every time less than 2 weeks, then you would still be a traveler for how long, however long the duration is, could be whole life. Now, if you decide to stay in 2 different cities for, say, for 2 weeks, for 4 weeks, but you have not specified. So together it's like, say, I'm going to be there for 25 days in Pakistan, but different cities. You haven't specified where. Since you haven't specified, then you'll be considered a traveler because you have not specified for 15 days in one place. Until you have that clearly in your mind, you would continue to be a traveler. Now, if you decided that I'll be in 2 cities next to each other, very close to each other, morning here and evening, I would always spend my evening in that particular area. I've got some work to do, say, in another city, yet I would be just working during the day. In the evenings, I would come back every night. So wherever you come, and that will be 20 days, for example, or 15 days, more than 2 weeks, then you will be considered a muqim, a resident. But if you happen to be in 2 different cities and together you have not decided for 14 days or more in any city, then you're still a traveler, even if the total duration might be more than 14 days. Soldiers, armies, when they're on their expedition, they've been stationed in a different place, they've been there, and they decide to have intention, they cannot make intention of being a resident because they're not resident there, they cannot be resident. They have to move from there sooner or later. They must continue to shorten their prayer as Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Tabuk did for 20 days. And how to pray when you're praying in the masjid as a traveler. So if you're a traveler and you happen to be, or you should ideally go to the masjid, the local masjid, unless there's a reason not to, so then you should just follow the imam. So behind the imam, as a traveler, you would perform all 4 rakat. You do not cut short and leave after 2 rakat, Dhuhr, Asr, and Isha. You have to do your all 4 rakat. Now, this is when you're performing behind the imam within the time. If God forbid you happen to miss your prayer, and this is qada prayer, and now you're joining the imam, you cannot join the imam who is resident if you are a traveler. You cannot perform your prayer behind someone who is a resident and he is doing his qada and you doing your qada. You cannot join them. You have to do your separate prayer. You cannot join that congregation if this is outside of the time. Within the time, you must follow that imam and perform all 4 rakat. But outside of the time, as a qada, you should do your own prayer. Now, as a traveler, if you are imam, you happen to be leading the prayer, then before you start the prayer ideally, and also as soon as you say salam after 2 rakat, you announce that please atimmu salatakum, please complete your prayers. For ana musafir, something like that, that I am a traveler. Complete your prayer, I am a traveler. And if you did it before and after, it's useful because some people might join you afterwards in the congregation and they might not know that you were a traveler and they perform their own prayer. Well, the way they would normally do. Because if they are performing their prayer, missed prayer, 2 rakat or whatever, if you've done 2 and they have to do their 2 more to complete their 4 rakat of Dhuhr, for example, then as a masbuq, as the muqtadi, they are not supposed to recite anything in their 3rd and 4th rakat. They would just stand up for the duration as if the imam would recite on their behalf because they are in the same jama'ah. They've not missed any rakat. They would just stand up for a minute or so and then do their ruku. They would not recite anything because it is not permissible for the muqtadi to recite any part of Quran behind the imam in all 4 rakat. Now, there is this concept of watan asli and watan iqama. Watan asli is a permanent residence where you are born or you got married, where you moved and migrated with the intention of staying there forever for job purposes, for studies, for whatever reason. You immigrated from one place to another place with the intention to stay there and you have not got a plan yet. You may be in future, but not a clear plan of coming back at some point. Then you are that place becomes your watan asli, which is your main permanent residence. So this is called watan asli. And you can replace it with another watan asli. If you decided to migrate to another place, that would become your watan asli. So you were born here, and then you move to another country, that would become your watan asli. Even if you, after a few years, come back, but that's a different matter. If you have the intention to stay at one place, that becomes your permanent address. And obviously, if you keep moving to different places, now if you stay there for less than 15 days, that is watan sakna or sukna, you can call it, which is not at all a watan, it's actually a temporary abode. But there is another temporary location where you just want to go there for more than, as a traveler really, not for long time, just for a short while, and you have not actually adopted that place to be your final abode for long time, but rather you just be there for 15 days, 20 days, a month, couple, that's it. So you're not a traveler there, but you are a muqim there. So you went there for a month, for example, 3 months, a year, but you have got clear plan to move out of that place after that time, more than 14, so as to not be a traveler, but rather a muqim, a resident. But that is a temporary residence, more than 15 days yet, but you're planning to move from there after completion of whatever needs you have from that place. So you would still be fulfilling and performing all 4 rakat in that place plus your watan asli. So if you have a house in Pakistan and you were born and raised there, you came here and stayed there for many years now, there's no plan to go back, or the plan whatever in future maybe, but no clear plan yet. Then when you go back to Pakistan, you are a traveler if you stay there for less than 15 days. On the other hand, you are in this country and now this is your final destination. This is your watan asli, your final place of residence. You go to Saudi Arabia for 3 weeks for Hajj or Umrah. That becomes your temporary residence, watan iqama, because you're not there for long time, but for some time. But that sometime is more than 2 weeks. So you're not a traveler, but you are a muqim, and you would fulfill all the obligation of a muqim, of a resident. You would not cut short your prayer. But when you come back here, you would still fulfill all the, obligation of a residence, means 4 rakat and everything would be as per normal. Even if you come back to your own country, watan asli, for 3 days, 5 days, 7 days, less than 14 days, doesn't matter. Your own house is your own house. Now, your parents' house is not your house, even if you will get that in inheritance at a later date, or if you were born there. So that is not your watan asli. It's up to you when you decided to migrate from one place to another place. That becomes your final destination. Now, yeah, as I said, your status remains the same. It doesn't matter. And if you, from the place of iqama, you move to another place, that ceases to be your place of iqama, and that goes without saying. This is quite common sense. So what about sunnah and nawafil while you are traveling? Ideally, you should perform all the sunnah and nawafil, because you will be rewarded in full if you perform your 2 fard for dhuhr. You'll be rewarded for all 4 because you've done the completion. You've done whole prayer for fard. But when it comes to sunnah and nawafil, if you didn't do your sunnah and nawafil, you would not be sinful, yet you would not be rewarded either. So if you are stationary at your hotel, your parents' house, or wherever you are, then it is highly recommended that you do your sunnah and nawafil and not waste your time. You go to masjid, you perform all your prayer. Yet, if you're traveling on your journey, on your way from here to there, say Manchester, and you have taken exit for petrol, for wudu, for toilet, for food, then you just perform your prayer, just do your fard and move on. But as a traveler, if you did not perform sunnah and nawafil, you would not be sinful, yet you'll be missing out a big time reward. So you shouldn't be missing out on that, especially the Fajr to Sunnah. Okay, so that concludes. If there was any question, you can ask, inshallah ta'ala. Otherwise, you can ask in the group, or you can type in and we can respond to it, maybe even later if you have any question. So when does intention not to fast during Ramadan, because they will be traveling that day, so they start the fast and yeah, exactly. So that you cannot, that's a very important question. You cannot, on the day that you're traveling, for example, this is Ramadan the 5th, and you decided to travel to Birmingham, you cannot opt for not fasting on that day. Oh, since we'll be traveling at 9 o'clock, there's no point fasting. No, you can't. That's haram. That's big time sin. You cannot withhold fasting in anticipation because something might happen. You might never travel. There may be some problems, whatever. You may end up staying and not travel at all. Flight maybe get cancelled. Many things can happen. And you are not a traveler as yet. So until you become traveler, you are not allowed to not fast. So you would fast. And if you're on the travel, you want to then, break your fast, you will not be sinful for that. Not that you should do it, not that you are encouraged to do it. For fasting is different. During the travel, it's better to fast. During the travel, it's obligatory to cut short your 4 fard into 2. Okay. Jazakallah khair. Any other question? Yeah, so we cannot combine prayers on our travel, which is the agreed upon position in Hanafi school, including Sahibain. The 2 students of Imam Abu Hanifa, the main students, they agree with Imam Abu Hanifa on this, that we cannot combine the prayer. They differ on certain other issues, for example, early asr time, but when it comes to combining, they agree that we cannot combine the prayer. And that's based on Quranic ayah, and the principle is, As Allah says in Quran, Inna salata kanat alal mu'minina kitaban mawquta. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prescribed prayers at an appointed time, and this appointed time is 5 times a day, not 3 times a day. And all the ahadith which suggest Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam combined, they could be, understood to mean the apparent combining, not true combining. Means it was prayed at a later time for the first prayer and earliest time of the second prayer. And that is why you would not find any hadith suggesting that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam or Sahaba ever combined, say, Asr and Maghrib. They didn't. Why not? Why can't we combine? If combining, true combining was okay, why is that we always combine Dhuhr and Asr, Maghrib and Isha in that order? Why that is? So that is on its own a very important point to suggest that it was never meant to be a true combining, and that is why Quran is very clear on that. So Hanafi's position is that Quran takes precedence, and you just do not change the ruling of Quran based on Hadith. You try to understand it in the light of Quran, inshallah. Okay. Jazakallahu khaira. See you next week. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.